Hello and welcome to Candidates on the Clock, sponsored by the Newton County Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Lanier Sims. Today I'm joined by Marc McMain, that's running for U.S. Congress, District 10. Mr. McMain, could you take a couple minutes and tell the citizens more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Marc McMain. I'll kind of start back. I opened my first business at the age of 19. I opened a martial arts studio. Matter of fact, just right down the road in Conyers. And I began that business with 7 students. And month by month, student by student, I built it to one of the largest martial arts studios in the state of Georgia. A few years later, I met my beautiful wife, Liliana, on the beaches of Cancun. We fell in love, and I decided I wanted to start our family. We got married, sold the business, and I went back to work for corporate America. And after a few years, I discovered I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So in 2003, in the basement of our home, we opened the MTM Shopper, a monthly advertisement publication that services the small business community. And just like the karate school, we began it page by page, month by month. And here we are 2 decades later. We have 9 locations. We franchised the business. We have a monthly distribution of around 225,000 magazines. And it's just a good, old-fashioned American success story. I've got 2 boys, Matthew and Marcus. They're both in college now pursuing their American dream. And I decided last spring that I wanted to get involved in the federal government. I think our nation is suffering, and the skills I've developed and the journey I've taken from being broke as a teenager to having started several successful small businesses has prepared me perfectly for Congress. I'm a leader. I'm a tenacious worker. I'm fiscally responsible, and Christ is my moral compass. And that's what's gotten me to where I am today.
Okay, thank you. As you know, we had citizens to submit questions, so we're just going to jump right in. First question, what's your view or how are you planning to address climate change?
Look, I do not think that the environment should be a left or right issue. I am a Christian conservative Republican, but I'm also very fond of our environment. I'm particularly fond of the Gulf Coast of the Gulf of Mexico. We have property down there. And I don't find anything more disturbing than seeing pollution or trash. So as far as the environment's concerned, I think we have to have pragmatic, realistic, scientific views as to what we do and how we go about it. But what's particularly important to me is the trash that we put in our ocean, which is just frightening. We're blessed in the Gulf Coast that it's not as bad, but when you go out to the Pacific Ocean, it's a disaster. The shipping channels between China and the United States has become so polluted. I have friends that are XOs in the Coast Guard that have sworn they would never sail a boat out in the Pacific because there's so much trash floating in the ocean. Those items frighten me, and I think they need to be addressed, and it shouldn't be a left or right issue.
Thank you. Currently, the Build Back Better plan is currently stalled in Congress. What provisions, if any, would you support in the Build Back Better plan?
Look, for starters, we have to stop spending money. I am not an advocate for the Build Back Better program. I love the idea of infrastructure, but the problem is the last infrastructure bill we passed really didn't address the infrastructure issue like it should have. They called it an infrastructure bill, but only a small fraction of it really went to infrastructure. What we're concerned about is balancing our budget. The inflation that we're seeing right now is because of the trillions of dollars that we've pumped into our economy. So I'm not worried about the name of the bill. I'm not worried about what it's called. What I want to do is move forward. We need to trim fat. We need to watch our spending. We need to balance our budget. We're at $30 trillion in debt. That's $100,000 for every person in this room right now. That's about 3 times what the average person makes in the United States. So we are burying ourselves, and it has to be addressed.
Thank you. What would be your plans to bring federal funds back to Newton County to make Newton County a better place to live, work, and play?
Look, I look at the entire 10th district, and there's things that need to be addressed. I know we have gaps in adequate health care coverage, whether it be community hospitals. I think our law enforcement needs assistance. Our law enforcement agencies right now are struggling to be competitive on a pay scale. But I want to be careful, Lanier, because what I'm running on, first off, I'm a term limits candidate, but I'm also running on balancing our budget. So I'm really not thinking about what I can go and get earmarked and tagged back for the 10th district. Will there be opportunities to do something that's reasonable and fair to our taxpayers? Yes, there will. But what I want to be sure is that we're not continuing in draining and taxing our budget, because all across this nation you hear stories about the left and the right earmarking and creating these pork projects for back home. I want to be very cautious about how we do that.
Okay, thank you. Something you touched on, I wanted to just go a little bit deeper, is term limits. So give us your view on term limits in Congress.
Yeah. I don't think our founding fathers ever dreamt that there would be people in the House of Representatives and the Senate making a career of this. We found that term limits for our presidents were great, and it should apply to all members of Congress. I think an adequate number of terms for somebody in the House of Representatives would be, say, 3 or 4 terms, which would be a total of 6 to 8 years. And then the Senate, a max of 2 terms, which would be 12 years. And the reason for that is this. I think if you go to D.C. and you work at the pace that you should be working at, so when you're legislating in Washington or you're back home serving your constituents, at the end of 6 or 8 years, you should be exhausted. So those that go up there and churn in the same spot for 18, 20, 26 years, they're no longer working linear. They're serving themselves. I want to go. I want to knock it out of the park. I want to hustle, work hard for my constituents, the 10th district, and then get out and pass the baton onto the next man or woman that's ready to go.
At what point do you think the federal government should implement wage and price controls to slow down this increasing inflation? Or what's your views on how to curb this inflation?
Yeah, look, I'm not a fan of the federal government getting involved on either wage or price controls. I think that's a dangerous, slippery slope. What we need to look at is bringing back critical elements to the United States and building them here. For example, the chips that we use, our microprocessor chips. When you look at, most of those are built in Taiwan, and they have created this massive logjam. I was just at the dealership down the street, the Chevrolet dealership. They have one new vehicle on the lot, and that's because there's a backlog of these chips. We cannot be held hostage anymore by foreign countries and transportation issues. We'd like to have those chips made here. The other one would be critical healthcare items. We found out during the pandemic that a lot of our things that we needed were made in China, which was frightening because that gives them an opportunity to hold us hostage, whether it's medicines or supplies. So those are 2 areas that I think if we were to bring those back here, it would help ease the flow, and it would help ease the inflation that we're facing now. New cars, used cars, I think I saw a report the other day, used cars are 30% higher today than they were just a couple years ago. And then, of course, fuel. I think everything's tied to gas, right? And lowering the gas prices has got to be paramount. The average person that's making $45,000 a year, when you're at $4 a gallon or $5.50 a gallon for diesel, it's crushing the average American family. Inflation is real and it's killing us right now.
Thank you. What will you do to support voters' rights?
Well, I firmly believe that in the United States, in particular in Georgia with SB 202, we have taken steps to be sure that our elections are fair. We've made cheating more difficult. I tell people this, there's nobody in the state of Georgia that has a right to do something that I don't have to do. We all have the same access to ballots and to voting. What we want to be sure of is that the integrity to our elections is restored. And if you have people that are fearful that our elections are no longer fair, we're going to have a distorted result in the upcoming elections. So that's critically important to me, to be sure that people have faith in our processes.
Okay, thank you. What would be, if elected, your legislative goals, and how will it impact the counties in your district?
Yeah, I've got a few legislative goals. I would say, for starters, term limits. We talked about that a second ago, so I'll kind of move past that. Term number 1, I would like to get some support implemented for our policing. When I watch, I've been endorsed by 5 sheriffs and chiefs of police in the 10th district. And it's not just because I'm a nice guy. It's because I've given them a vision as to what I think we can do to protect policing moving forward. When you look at an average officer right now or sheriff, they're underpaid. They risk their lives to defend us. But more frightening than that, if you were to put 100 of them in a room and ask them, do they want their children to become police officers, 99 are going to say no. In Lanier, that's frightening. We're killing the future of law enforcement. So what I want to do is I want to enact legislation that's going to give police unprecedented protection so that when and we're blessed out here where we live in Walton and Newton counties. It's a pretty great place. But you get into some of the more hostile areas up north where these police are daily agitated and assaulted by the Antifa members. We have to fix that problem because they can't staff properly. Sheriffs can't find deputies. Police departments can't find police. So it's an issue that I want to get. I've got legislative ideas to help secure that and secure the future of law enforcement.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. McMahon, for answering the top questions submitted by our citizens. At this time, can you close us out with any further information about yourself or your campaign, and how can the voters get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people this. We have to start falling out of love with career politicians. I've spent the past 30 years of my life raising my family, building my business, and serving my community. Getting involved in politics is something that wasn't on the radar for me a few years ago. But when I look and I see what's taking place in our country, if people like myself on both sides of the aisle, Lanier, clear-minded, God-fearing people, if they don't get involved, we're not going to have a country in another 2 to 4 years. So what I tell people is this: if you want an outsider, somebody who's going to come in with real ideas, somebody that has real world experience. I've lived in everyone's shoes. I've been broke as a teenager. I've started several successful small businesses. I'm your guy. If you want somebody that's a smooth talking professional politician, that is not me. I want to go up there for 6 or 8 years. I want to knock it out of the park, and I want to get some things done that'll benefit everybody. My name is Marc McMain. My website is marcforcongress.com, and I spell my first name correctly. It's spelled with a C. So it's marcforcongress.com. If you go to my website, you can learn more about me, and if you want to get involved, there's a lot of different ways to get involved in the campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you.